Hi, John Maxwell here. I'm so glad you're with me today on Mondays with Maxwell. I like the habit that we're getting into, a habit of, just taking a little bit of time on Monday from noon Eastern Standard Time to about 12:20 and just picking up some good advice. In fact, you could really do me a favor, I think, and that is if you have a best advice that you've either received from somebody or, hey, it's from you and you'd like to say, hey, John, I've got some best advice for you. Would you just send it to us? I would love to do that. And I'm going to assume that if you just send it, go to mondayswithmaxwell.com, I'm going to assume that you could send it to us and we could get it. And I'd like to read it. I'd like to see what your best advice is, because what we really do is we, on Monday, come together and we just kind of huddle and we talk about, how can you help me? What advice have you learned? What advice can you give? And we're really helping each other. We're making each other a lot better. And one of my wonderful friends for a long time, Henry Cloud, he and I were having a dinner recently. And so I was talking to him, and he knew about Mondays with Maxwell and best advice. And I said, well, Henry, give us some best advice from your perspective. Now, before I give you what he said, Henry is a world-class leadership coach, especially to CEOs and business executives. He's a clinical psychologist. He's a speaker, very popular speaker. He's an author. He wrote the book Boundaries, one of the most life-impacting books I've ever read. He wrote the book Integrity, the One Life Solution. And he also wrote a book called Necessary Endings. And when I asked Henry, I said, what is the advice that you would give people? I mean, okay, they come around, and what should I pass on from you? Here's what he gave me. He said, help them understand, on your best advice series, the value of necessary endings. Now, I'll have to say, when he said that, I thought, okay, I need to kind of read up on this myself. I had not read his book, Necessary Endings, until he suggested that. So I got the book and I read it. It was very good. And so that I could kind of pass on his best advice in a maybe a more well-rounded, mature way. And the thesis of his book and the thesis of his advice on understanding the value of necessary endings is as follows. Here's what he says. Growth demands that we move on. And without the ability or willingness to end things, people get stuck, never becoming who they are meant to be. And I thought, when I read that thesis, I thought, this is very graphic. It's very visual. He's basically saying that if we're going to grow, the very fact that we're growing, it demands that we keep moving, we move on. But if we don't end things, we get stuck. And so it's almost a picture of, I know I should be up there a couple of miles ahead, but I'm not there. I'm stuck, and I'm stuck because I haven't made the endings that are necessary for me in my personal life, in my business life, in my friendship life. And so the question is that visual of getting stuck and not being able to move on when growth demands that we do this, that visual picture of us being stuck caused me to ask the question, why do we get stuck? Henry says that we get stuck because we have avoided necessary endings. So I'm going to now read a little bit that I picked up out of his book and pass it on to you. Here's what he said. We do not know if an ending is actually necessary or if it or he is fixable. We are afraid of the unknown. I mean, why do we avoid necessary endings? Well, we're afraid of the unknown. We fear confrontation. We're afraid of hurting somebody. We're afraid of letting go and the sadness associated with the ending. There's a lot of afraid there, did you notice? We do not possess the skills to execute a proper ending. We do not even know the right words to use. We have had too many, I think this has happened to all of us, we've had too many and too painful of endings in our personal history, so we just kind of want to avoid another one. Well, I think the thing that grabs me, and the reason I like this best advice, and I'm passing it on to you today, I think the thing that grabs me is this statement: the good cannot begin until the bad ends. In other words, I cannot go to where I need to go and be who I need to be if I don't finish off the things that I need to stop. So why the question that we ask ourselves on this Best Advice series is why necessary endings are necessary? Why are they so necessary? Well, I came up with, not in his book, but just in my own thinking as I went through this, I said, I think there are three reasons, at least three. I think there are more than this, but let me give you three. I think there are three reasons why necessary endings are necessary. The first one is our growth demands it. Now, I'll have to say, when I say our growth demands it, that comes from Henry, who gave the visual illustration again in the thesis that we get stuck, and that we are to, growth demands that we move on, and yet we get stuck. So I think our growth demands it. I can remember being at Fuller Seminary and sitting down with Olin Hendricks, who was a mentor of mine when I lived out in California. And I can remember him taking a napkin at a lunch, and with a pen on that napkin, put the word growth. And he said, "John, do you covet that growth in your life?" I said, "Oh, I want to grow. I have a passion to grow." And then he put kind of a slash forward, and he put change on the other side of that. And he said, "John, if you really want to grow, you have to be willing to change." And he's the one that told me change doesn't mean growth, but growth does mean change. In other words, it's possible for you and I to change something and not grow because of it. But if we grow, we are constantly changing. And that's what Henry is saying here. He's saying that we get stuck unless we, so growth demands it. So let me illustrate that. When I began in my 20s to go on what I would call an intentional personal growth journey. In other words, I said, okay, I'm going to grow, I'm going to develop myself. One of the first awakenings that I had when I decided to commit myself to intentional growth was the fact that I needed to make necessary endings in my life. Now, to be honest with you, I wish I could take up my 20 minutes and talk to you about what I'm about to say, because when I reflected and I thought back, in my reflection, I just discovered why I have been able to grow so well in my life. Because when I said I'm going to intentionally grow, I immediately was confronted with the fact that if I'm going to intentionally grow, there are some necessary endings I need to make, and they were in three areas. I had to have some necessary endings of my habits. I had to have some necessary endings of how I thought, and I had to have, this was the hard one to be honest with you, I had to have some necessary endings of friendships. So let me just briefly say the habits that I had to have. I had to stop some habits because I had some habits that weren't helping me. They were hurting me, and I had to be very intentional, and I had to exchange, what should I say, bad habits for good habits. I also had to change my thinking. And I had to realize that I had to be a student every day, that I had to always learn, and that I had to continually expand and have no finish line and ask myself continually, how far can I go? But the hardest change that I had to make, the most difficult necessary endings, honestly for me, were with my friends. I can still remember when I was 30 reflecting about my college years and kind of sadly admitting to myself that of all the kids that were friends of mine in college, I only had maybe at best a handful, 3 or 4, that were still friends. I mean, now these other people, they weren't enemies, we weren't anti-anything. It's just that I realized that when I was committed to growing, some of my friends, they weren't committed to that. And so therefore, I had to ask myself, how much time will I give people that aren't passionate about developing and growing themselves? And slowly, not always intentionally, but slowly those friends began to drop off, because can I tell you something? If you're really going somewhere and succeeding and a person beside you isn't going anywhere, it's only a matter of time until that relationship widens to the place that you drop it. So why make necessary endings? For me, through my habits and through my thinking and through some of my friends, I had to say goodbye. I had to let them go. Because here's what I know. It's an old baseball analogy. If you're on first base, you can't steal second without taking your foot off of first. You can't have one foot on first and stretch, 90 feet to second base, and you can't be safe in both places. It's not possible. You've got to have a necessary ending to the first base so you can get to the second base. The second reason I think necessary endings are necessary is because business requires it. In your business world, there are times when you have to say goodbye. Tim McCarthy, I don't know if you remember him or not, but I used to watch a lot more baseball than I watch now, but he was the announcer for a lot of years for the New York Mets. And he also was a very good Major League baseball catcher. And Tim McCarthy, when I talk about business requires necessary endings, one time Tim McCarthy said, you have to improve your club even if it means letting your own brother go. When I saw that, I thought, okay, that makes you gulp a little bit, doesn't it? But what's Tim saying? Tim's basically saying, as a leader's responsibility, your responsibility is to improve your team, your business, whatever it is. And that may mean letting somebody as close as your brother go. He was just saying business requires necessary endings. And there are three questions in business that you ask yourself, that I ask myself when I'm coming up to this necessary ending stage of my business life. When I know that I have to make a break from something or someone, or if I have to make a change, I ask myself three questions, and these three questions help clarify if I need to have a necessary ending. And one of those questions is, what's best for the organization? Another question is, what's best for the person, the one that I'm going to perhaps have the ending with? And then the third question is, what's best for me? Okay? Those are the three questions. What's best for the organization? What's best for the person that I need to make that necessary ending? And then the third question, what's best for me? And what I want you to note is, if you have 2 out of 3 yeses on those three questions, then you need to make the necessary ending. If it's only 1 out of 3, then usually you don't make that necessary ending, with the exception if the one yes out of the 3 is about me. So let me go back, and what's best for the organization, what's best for the person, what's best for me? What I'm saying is very simple. When it's best for the organization and when it's best for the person, to be honest with you, what's best for me, that's not even in the consideration. Because I've got to put the person that perhaps I'm making the necessary ending, and I've got to put the organization that I am a steward to lead, I got to put them before me. That's one of the things that leaders begin to understand, that leaders not only always go first in leading the way, they always also please themselves last. Sometimes people come to me and they say, John, I've got somebody on my team and I'm not sure if I should keep them on my team or not. In other words, do I need to make a necessary ending, or is it unnecessary? And what I share with them is, I share with them, when you've got somebody on your team and you're not really sure whether to keep them or not, you just ask yourself a simple question. If they weren't on my team today, but I had the opportunity to hire them, would I hire them? I mean, now that I know what I know, now when I hired them the first time, I didn't know all these things, but now that I know what I know, and now that I know this, would I hire them? Now, it's obvious if the answer is yes, then you keep them. That's simple. And sometimes the answer is no, I wouldn't hire them at all. Then that answer is simple too. Then you make the necessary ending. But sometimes the answer, when we ask that question, is I'm not sure. And if you're not sure and you don't know, what I tell you to do is to hold it for no more than 6 months. I think that's maybe a little long, probably 3 months. But hold it for a few months, okay? And then ask yourself the question again. Now that if this person wasn't on my team and I could hire them, now that I know what I know, would I hire them? And let me just say this. If after a couple months you still are saying, well, I just don't know if I would hire them, can I tell you something? Let them go. Make the necessary ending. Because you really do know. You just haven't emotionally embraced what you probably mentally already understand. So why are necessary endings necessary? Well, because 1, growth demands it. Number 2, business requires it. But there's one more that I want to give you, and that is leadership expects it. All leaders know. All leaders know that you have to give up to go up. All leaders know that you have to define reality. All leaders know that respect is earned. It's gained on difficult ground. All leaders know that the only decisions you even make as a leader are the decisions that are the hard ones. I mean, the problem with being a leader is the only decisions you get to make are the ones you honestly don't even want to make. You want to let somebody else make it, but you make it because that's what leaders do. I shared with you in one of our other best advice lessons, those 6 rules that Jack Welch had of successful leaders. Control your destiny or someone else will. Face reality as it is, not as you wish it was or as it was. Be candid with everybody. Don't manage, lead. Change before you have to. Okay, all those observations of Jack Welch are all back about the fact that as a leader, you have to make necessary endings. In my book on the laws of teamwork, I talk about the law of the chain. And I talk about the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And I talk about what happens when you have somebody on your team that's just not cutting it. What do you do? I mean, you need to make an ending, but you don't maybe want to make an ending. And what happens in that process? And I share in that in going that route. In going that route, one of the things I say is the fact that when you have somebody that you need to maybe let go, but you don't, what happens is after a while, the rest of the leaders who also know that there needs to be a change with that individual, they begin to lose respect for you because they know that you haven't made the hard call, and they're kind of just saying, I wonder when they're going to do that. And I think leaders, in general, leaders wait too long. Now, that's not always true. That's just general principle. I think in my life, until I matured in my leadership and got the confidence I need, I know for sure that I waited too long before I made those necessary endings, only to find out that by waiting too long, you lose the best timing. And sometimes we just need to look at it, as Henry Cloud says, and say, okay, I need to let go of I need to let go of some place so I can go to some place. I think it's important to transition early and make those necessary transactions early. And the reason for that is I think it's important because you want to hand the baton off at full speed. If you hand the baton off a little early, you don't do near as much damage as if you pass the baton a little late. And you don't leave something, you go to something. But the longer you hold, the more you're leaving something instead of going something. And then there's no finish line. There's just, when you realize that, then all of a sudden, those necessary endings become, I think, a more of a reality in your life. So Henry, thank you for this advice. I think this is really good stuff. It helps me, and I hope it helps you. And by the way, probably for all of us, I mean, when this lesson's done, we've got a necessary ending or two that we probably need to, as leaders, go make. Now, I want to reverse this lesson and best advice that Henry gave us, because Mark Cole, my CEO friend, my partner, co-owner in the John Maxwell enterprise, the whole deal. I want Mark, come on over here and stay beside me for a moment, because let's forget about necessary endings for a second. Let's
talk about necessary beginnings.
That's exactly right. I hadn't even talked to you about this. Because there's a necessary beginning for some of our friends out there that I want them to not miss.
Yeah.
So just tell them about it, would you please?
Well, John, it's funny because the intersection of this necessary ending and this necessary beginning was true for me when I came to your team 21 years ago. I was making a necessary ending in my life. It was one of those necessary endings and this great advice.
Yeah.
And yet I found myself on your team working alongside you. At that point, gang, I was really working for him. He don't like us saying that, but I was working alongside you. And I was an entry-level telesales representative when I first started with John. 75 dials a day to get people to make a decision to come to an event where they could have a necessary beginning.
Yeah, sure.
And that was my case. And here I am 21 years later standing alongside of you, a true partner, a true friend, with someone that gave me an opportunity that he's given to over 39,000 people in 161 countries.
Wow.
I'm talking about your John Maxwell team. In fact, if you are a regular of Mondays with Maxwell, you've heard from some of our teams that have truly built a business from zero to many of them 6-7 figures because of the opportunity, John, that the John Maxwell team affords.
Beautiful.
And when you talk about this advice that you've been giving us over and over again, my advice to you, John's given some great advice today. If you've been watching every Monday, there's been a lot of advice given to you. But today, I would give you the advice, and this would be my advice. Do like me, that at a point in my life, I was making a necessary ending to begin a necessary beginning. Join our team. Join the John Maxwell team, and whether you are happy with where you are and you're making some necessary endings as John's advice today, or whether you're like me, you are ready to start a new business, a new opportunity, a new way of adding value to others. Either way, I want to challenge you. My advice to you today is join the John Maxwell team.
Yeah.
Now, you can do that. You can get all the information of that. Wherever you are around the world, you can figure that out by going to mondayswithmaxwell.com. Now, that's Mondays plural, mondayswithmaxwell.com. And there you're going to find information like I did on how to join John Maxwell's team and radically change my life and begin a new me. In fact, John has been challenging us the last couple of weeks. People that do this, Mark, team, people that do this, can we give them something? And so today, for those of you that go to mondayswithmaxwell.com, take a minute, no more than 2, fill out your information to get one of our program advisors to call you on what it means to join John's team. And if you'll do that in the next 24 hours, those of you that are watching live all around the world, if you will do that, those of you in the United States, we will send you a book. That's a great book, John.
Thanks,
You do know you did pretty good on that book, right?
Pretty good.
You must think well. And that's our gift to you for only filling out the form of getting more information. Now, we'll call you, we'll give you more information, and I believe you'll have a necessary beginning. And this is all for those of you watching live today, Mondays with Maxwell. If you respond in the next 24 hours, we're going to give that to you. Now, many of you are saying, hey, wait, I was busy Monday. I'm still watching. Count me in. I want to be a part of the team too. And we're going to let you do that. In fact, if you'll respond now, we'll get you something as well. It won't be the book, but we will give you a free value add that will help you in your journey as you learn more about joining John's team. Now, I've got to thank you, John. I've got to thank you. The reports, the responses week in and week out of what you do to go and get your friends to impact all of us. Whether you join our team or not, I know you have received value. In fact, I wish that you would go to wherever you're watching this, YouTube or perhaps it's Facebook Live, and I wish you would leave a comment that we can share with John on how he has impacted you. Join the team, mondayswithmaxwell.com, and we look forward to changing the world together. John, I'd love for you to close us out today.
Let me ask you a question, Mark, in wrapping this up. So when you ask them to go to mondayswithmaxwell.com and fill out the information, how long does it take them to do that?
Oh, less than a minute. I mean, for some of us that have a hard time spelling, it may take us 2 minutes. That's if you can't spell your home city.
Yeah.
But it takes very little time.
So basically, you're saying that if they would just take a minute and fill it out, we'll send you my book. I think that's a value added for you, and so do it right now, would you? We're wrapping it up, and Mark, thank you for all you do for me, and well, for all you do for our companies and for all you do for millions of people out there. But thank you, and thank you for being with me on Monday with Maxwell and with Mark. We love being with you, and I'll see you next Monday. But now go immediately and fill out that information. We'll send you the book.